Today's episode is proudly sponsored by the Rising Tide Mastermind. Each and every year, the Rising Tide Mastermind gets together in Atlanta for a live event. This is one of the most anticipated events within the Rising Tide Mastermind. Normally, we have a Zoom call each and every week, but this is where we all come together and we become better friends. We learn more about each other and we help each other with their issues. It is my favorite thing, and I'm sure it is going to be your favorite thing to look forward to if you were a member of the Rising Tide Mastermind. That could be a possibility. To find out if the Rising Tide Mastermind is right for you and you are right for the Rising Tide Mastermind, go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind and you can schedule a 15-minute call with me to find out more. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast. My name is Trace Blackmore, the host of this awesome industrial water treatment podcast. And nation, happy end of March. It's hard to believe that we are entering into quarter two just in a few days. And it feels like just the other day, I was talking to you about the end of last year and the beginning of this current year. Like I do each and every year, I always encourage you at the beginning and the end of the year to plan, to evaluate at the end of the year what has been going on, what did life teach you, and how can you use those lessons to make this upcoming year better. And then in the beginning of the year, I encourage you to plan. I encourage you to create goals and create plans around those goals so you can make that year the best that you can make that year. So many people just run through their year by default. They go by day, and as the phone rings, as emails happen, as texts come in, that's what they do. Nation, it is easy to fall into that trap. That is how our world is set up with all of these wonderful devices that we have. It makes it very easy for people to get a hold of us. And because of that, the expectation is that we drop what we're doing and we solve whatever that issue is. My hope, by listening to the end of year episodes of this podcast, the beginning of the year episodes in this podcast, that you're thinking differently. You are thinking about how do you mitigate all of those calls, all of those texts, all of those emails. What can you do proactively so you're not putting out fires? How do you anticipate potential fires? And nation, when you do that, that's where real time comes back. Maybe I can do something a little bit extra on this account. Maybe I'm going to be here next month and there is a 4-week supply of product on this account. Well, what happens if I miss a week? What happens if I get sick? Well, now it becomes an emergency. So maybe I need to make sure there's 2 months worth or whatever that number needs to be. So now I've on site, I've built in some buffer if there is an issue. And if I start thinking about that and things around that, how do I prevent potential issues that may never happen? But if they did, I built a buffer in there. Maybe a customer is almost out of reagent and they can last until your next visit. Well, again, what happens if you can't make it when you planned? What happens if that customer's not there and you can't talk with them or you can't get the purchase order or whatever it is? Anticipate what you're going to need earlier, and then you won't have those issues. Without having to put out fires, now you have time to work on things that are of value to you, that are important to you, that are going to change your life for the things that you want to accomplish. So all this being said, I hope that you are planning. I hope that you have figured out what you want to do this year, and each and every quarter, you're figuring out what are the 90-day goals that you're going to do each quarter and holding yourself accountable for that. If you have not read The 12-Week Year, of course, that is my favorite book to talk about planning. It talks about how to plan, but also how to execute and how to replan just in case your plans did not work out the way that they needed to. We have an affiliate link that you can go to, scalinguph2o.com/12, the number 12-week year. And you can get a copy of that. It's on Audible. But I have to tell you, I really think this is a book that you need to own a copy of because there's a lot of tables, a lot of charts in there that just help. And there are a lot of things online that you can use from the 12-week year website that help you with planning, with goal determination. What happens when you get off of your plan? All that they've got worksheets for. Highly recommend that. It's a great system to work on. But the reason I'm talking about this today is because we are ending quarter one. The end of March represents the end of quarter one. So we should be at the first 90-day goal marker of whatever our yearly goals were. Now, for many of you, you probably are checking the box each and every week. And by the way, that's what 12-week year teaches us, that each and every week we should have tactics in order to complete those 90-day goals. And then those 90-day goals are going to roll up into what our yearly goals are. So if you have not kept up with that, it's the end of March, it's the end of Q1. Do what I ask everybody to do at the end of the year. Evaluate the last quarter. Last year, I asked you to evaluate the entire year, but at the end of each quarter, evaluate. What is life trying to teach you? What have you learned? How do you make the next quarter better with those lessons? And what a great time to do that at the end of each and every quarter. Nation, I love giving you tips like this. I love it when people tell me they're using them and they're making a difference in their life. And one of the ways that people tell me is they sign up for the Hang. We've got a Hang coming up in just a few weeks. That's April 11th. You can go to scalinguph2o.com/hang. That's HANG. And you can sign up. We're going to start at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We will end at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. A very quick video conference call where you will meet new people. You will learn about some things that are going on in the industry. And then you just get to network. And so many people have met other people on these hangs, and they've been solving problems. They've been finding experts for equipment that maybe they didn't know they had a problem yet, and then they knew somebody from a hang where they were able to call and get their questions answered, their equipment fixed, and their customer happy. This happens all the time on the hangs, and it's a great way to meet and talk with people that are in the industry that you are in. Can you even think of a better group of people than people that are in the best industry in the world and they understand what you're going through each and every day? So once again, that is the Hang on April 11th, Eastern Time, 6 p.m. through 7 p.m. I can't wait to see you there. And so many times on the Hang, people will tell me that they're doing planning like this. They're really enjoying reading the 12-week year or are using the tactics out of the 12-week year. So I personally love the Hang because I get personal feedback about this podcast on that, and I see all the benefits that people get. So I hope to see you on the Hang. You might also want to put on your calendar Texas Water Week 2024. That's going to be April 9th through 12th in Fort Worth, Texas. Texas Water is the joint annual conference of the Water Environment Association of Texas and the Texas Section American Water Works Association. So this is the 28th year that they've been holding this conference, and it's all around wastewater and all things water industry, and including water quality engineers, treatment plant technicians, scientists, government officials, regulatory agency personnel, manufacturers, universities, and all other types of water-related folks. Nation, if you want to learn more about this conference, go to our events page, and we'll have all that listed there. Maybe you're going to be in Bali, Indonesia, May 18th through 24th. Well, that's the 10th World Water Forum. And we'll have all of that information for the 10th World Water Forum on our events page. And also the Inventions in Treatment Technologies 2024 is taking place May 21st through 24th at Virginia Beach, Virginia in the Convention Center there. This conference is all about innovations in treatment technologies designed to serve as a cutting-edge showcase for an introduction and discussion of innovations of new practices for water resources and recovery facilities. So if this is the type of water treatment you practice, you might want to check that out. And then finally, for our friends in the Netherlands, June 9th through 14th, the International Conference of Urban Drainage is taking place in the Netherlands, and we'll have all of that information for you. Where else but on our events page? Nation, I do want to mention the events page because so many people are saying that they had no idea that a particular event was going to be in their home city, but they went to the events page. They found out that, hey, I don't have to go to a hotel. I don't have to travel. And I can get a one-day pass and I can go to this event. So by all means, go to scalinguph2o.com, navigate over to our events page, and you will see all things industrial water treatment. And one of the things I want to ask of you, if you know of a particular conference that's not on there related to the water treatment industry, let us know that, and we will get that on there. We're trying to make that the one-stop place for you to go to stay in the know all things industrial water treatment. Well, Nation, as you know, one of my friends, Charlie Cicchetti, introduced me to podcasting, or at least listening to podcasting, back in 2014 or 13, somewhere around there. And then he was the driving force to get me to do my own podcast. He's been on our podcast several times, but Charlie's a great friend. We are in several groups together. And Charlie loves to introduce people to people he thinks you should know. And he did that with our next guest. And I'm sure glad he did. I know you're going to enjoy this interview. My lab partner today is Dr. Andrew Temte, author, podcaster, and management consultant. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks for having me on the show, Trace.
Well, it is only fair play because you had me on your show. And how much fun was that?
It was loads and loads of fun. I don't normally get folks from the water treatment industry on my show. I come from an education background, so it was great to introduce you to our listeners and let them see a different side in a different industry.
It was a lot of fun for me as well. And just seeing another podcaster's process is always helpful for me and my team. And you guys were top notch. And the end result was, I thought, great.
Yeah, it was great.
So since we're talking about the podcast, why don't you tell the Scaling Up Nation a little bit about your podcast?
So my show is the Balancing Act podcast, and I invite industry leaders and business leaders to talk about the balancing acts that they play in their both personal but mainly in their professional lives. We focus on the balancing act between organizational trust and accountability in that show, and that's the theme really of my two books. The first book is Balancing Act, and the second book is The Balanced Business. So that's my whole shtick, if you will, that, we live in this highly, highly polarized world, but most decisions, most business processes and business success long-term business success relies upon collaboration and the diversity of thought and opinion in an organization. So I'm trying to bring business leaders kind of back towards center here a little bit.
One of your famous questions that I think you ask all your guests is, what was your rocket booster?
Yeah.
How did you come up with that? And what are some of the greatest answers you've gotten from those questions?
Yeah, I really like asking what was the main accelerant to your career? And what I'm in that question, what I'm trying to tease out from folks is, where did you get your inspiration? And it almost always leads back to some kind of positive or negative mentorship and coaching relationship. It's either this person told me that I couldn't, and so therefore I did, and it changed my trajectory. That's a very common answer. Or, gosh, I met this individual and they just lit a spark in me that I had no idea was there. They saw something in me that I didn't know existed, and I started feeding off of that energy, and all of a sudden, here I am, kind of an answer.
So my assumption is anybody can find your podcast anywhere podcasts are found?
Absolutely. We're on Apple, we're on Google, we're on everywhere.
Yeah, and that's an ordeal. I don't know if the listeners know this, but you got to figure out, okay, what services are going to send to other services, because there's so many services out there. You don't want to not serve somebody.
Yeah, I've met a lot of people in the podcast service industry, and beautiful man, Billy Salibi owns a company called Podify. So if any of your listeners are out there and they want to start their own show, but don't have the wherewithal or don't know where to start, there are reputable companies out there in a sea of not so reputable companies that are trying to get your business in the podcast space. So you can do it. And I encourage everybody to, try to find their voice. And podcasting isn't for everybody, but it is an accessible medium for people to get their message out.
And I think I read recently there's like 3.8 million podcasts out there.
Yeah, and our little show ranks in the top 15 in the management subcategory on Apple Podcasts consistently, with about 2,000, 2,500 listeners a week, which is good, but it's not a lot. But so there are lots and lots and lots of podcasts that don't get a lot of listenership. So if you think you're going to enter the podcast game and all of a sudden have a gigantic audience, a little planning and foresight on the front end will help with that.
To put that in comparison, a friend of mine, John Lee Dumas, he does Entrepreneurs on Fire. I was talking with him at a conference, and he was, I think, one of the first podcasters. He has millions of downloads. And at the time, I had very few. And I want to say it was a couple hundred. And at that time, he said, imagine if a couple hundred people just came to hear you speak. That's a pretty big crowd. And that really changed my point of view of how I looked at that.
Yeah. Again, you got to think really carefully about who your target audience is. Who is it that you're trying to reach? Stay away from those dopamine hits of, I've got people listening. Are they the right people who are listening? Because a small audience of the quote unquote right listeners who are going to respond to your message and help grow your business is a lot more important than thousands and thousands of listeners who aren't really listening, but just kind of riding along.
Well, in addition to being a world-famous podcaster, you're also an author. And thank you. You sent me an autographed copy of your new book, The Balanced Business. That actually went on vacation with me over the holiday break. So I read that in the Caribbean. I was thinking of all the things that you put into that book as we were on a cruise. And what a well-written book. And I can't wait to unpack that in today's show.
Thank you, Trace.
One of the things I thought I would start out with, do you mind telling the Scaling Up Nation a bit about you and some things that you've done throughout your career?
Yeah, so I'm a high school dropout. I like to lead with that because of its shock value. I hold a Ph.D. from the University of Iowa, so I like to try to jog people's preconceptions of what high school dropouts are and what they can do with their lives. There is a path out of being a high school dropout, and I'm here as evidence of that. So I hold a PhD in finance from the University of Iowa. My purpose is to teach, coach, mentor, and inspire. I was fortunate, very fortunate, to be connected with a mentor early in my career, a guy named Carl Swazer, who was the head of the finance department at the University of Iowa. He and I connected almost immediately on our first meeting, and we went on to start a business called the Swazer Study Program for the CFA exams, the Chartered Financial Analyst exams. We built that business throughout the 1990s. I left the University of Iowa with a Ph.D. in hand, but didn't go into teaching because we had this wonderful growth business that was allowing me to do some of the most impactful teaching that I could ever do anywhere in my career, and also build a business. We were acquired by Kaplan, the global education company, in 1999, and I spent 22 years there leading various parts of the Kaplan business. I have one foot in higher education. I was the president of the College of Business and Technology at what used to be called Kaplan University, which is now Purdue Global. I was the interim president of a small college out in New Hampshire, and I've spent most of my career firmly embedded in the world of professional education, licensures, designations, certifications.
Well, thank you for that. And not bad for a high school dropout, eh?
Yeah.
I love that you start with that. And I do want to mention, because friend of this show is Charlie Cicchetti. I know that's how you and I got introduced. That's how I learned what a podcast was. Charlie told me, hey, do you listen to podcasts? And he got my first podcast player downloaded for me.
Yeah, super guy.
I want to say he was on this show, episode 4. So he gave me the idea, and he was really, really early on. So great guy. It's all about relationships. It's all about people helping each other. So I'm curious, why did you decide to write The Balanced Business?
Well, I've learned so much over my 35, almost 40-year career. I left Kaplan in early 2022. My run there was very successful. I felt every day like I was adding value, but it was time to start packaging up what's in between my two ears and getting it out into other people's hands. Far too many leaders leave the business world and take all of their accumulated knowledge with them, and maybe it gets disseminated to a small group of folks. Maybe they do a little teaching and coaching on the side. I wanted to do something much bigger than that. I wanted to reach much larger potential audiences with my message. So, late 50s at the time, now just turned 60 back in September. It is the right time in my life to package up everything that I have to say in a coherent fashion and pass it on to current and future generations.
I love that you have that mindset that we have the duty to pass on the knowledge that we've created. What was the thing in Star Trek? The mind meld? It's too bad we don't have those. But the books are the next best thing. And again, a very well-written book. There was a question that I wanted to start off with. We've had several people on from the entrepreneurial operating system and EOS and how to run meetings and get started with some of the tools that you need. I'm kind of curious, how does your book line up with the entrepreneurial operating system?
Yeah. So if I had to really pin down the target market for my work, it is large, small businesses to small, large businesses. So kind of anything between 50 million and a couple of billion in annual turnover is about the size of the business that I'm targeting. And EOS, before the show, the other two, Traction and the Scaling book, they are designed for the entrepreneurial cycle, that period of rapid growth where you're just go, go, go. The sky is the limit. Where I start is when growth starts to slow down, where entropy has started to set in the company. entropy, the part of the second law of the laws of thermodynamics, that everything is going to fall apart eventually. Well, that happens in your business. You install processes that calcify, and it becomes the way it's always been done, and everybody kind of looks around at each other. Trust starts to erode because you're not quite sure who those new people are who are running those departments that you no longer know everything about. Because when everybody's all together in a 25, 50 person team, everybody knows everybody else. Everybody can jump in and help out here and there. What do you do when you need some real formal structure to the business, especially when trust and accountability become more rare than they are common in your business? That's where my work fits in.
Well, let's jump off from something you just mentioned, because I think all of those things stem from team culture. And without a good team culture, well, you don't have a good team. How do you determine how your culture is throughout your entire company and various teams?
Well, I like to tell leaders to go to the Gemba. And the Gemba is a term from the world of continuous improvement. And it's a Japanese term, and it simply means where the work happens. So you want to, too many leaders sit in their office, they opine on this or that, but they don't go to the Gemba. They don't go to where the work actually happens. Some people like to call it the coal face of the business. So who knows the most about your customer? Not you, the chief executive. The people that know the most about your customer are your frontline employees. The people are interacting directly with each of your clients. So hearing from them directly about how they're doing and how teams are interacting with one another, and just setting your phone down and listening to what is being said. Don't walk in with any preconceived notions. A Gemba walk is a leader, a small set of leaders, setting their egos aside, going to where the work happens, opening their minds and their ears, and listening to what's going on. That is first and foremost where I would start. And then I would corroborate that with what are the informal communication modalities and mechanisms that are happening within the company? Where does the average person get their information? Is it from the water cooler? Is it from rumor and innuendo? Or is it primarily through the channels that you as the leadership team set up? And if the water cooler is driving communication in the company, that is a huge red flag that is sticking up that you got to get a handle on.
So once you determine that you've got a good culture, or maybe there's some things you need to fix within that culture, where do you start with that?
A lot of Band-Aid programs are out there. And as a former chief executive, I was sold, in quotes, on a number of systems and programs that somebody from the outside could come in and, quote unquote, install into my existing management operating system that were supposed to fix, in quotes, the cultural challenges that we were facing. And it was only after a few failed attempts at bringing in outside consultants, et cetera, to fix the issue did I realize that culture comes from me. From the top is where culture is established and propagates through the organization. So to build the culture that you want as a leader, you have to start with you and your senior leadership team. And most often, you got to go back to first principles, which is the basic strategy questions of the business. And you got to answer those things. Purpose. Why are we here? Vision. Where are we going? Values, behaviors. What do we value? How do we want people to behave? And then once you have the beginnings of that management operating system, you have to be consistent and repeatable and reliable. You have to live that purpose, live that vision, live the values and behaviors, because as soon as your people start seeing things as slogans and a flavor of the week or month, you're just going to tune out and go back to whatever status quo has been established and those informal water cooler networks that they've relied upon for the real truth of what's happening in the business.
So making sure everybody's rowing in the right direction, they know what river they're in, is all around mission. And I'm willing to bet that most companies, you can go out there and you say, hey, why do we do what we do? And you're probably going to get all different answers.
Yeah. And, I'm not a huge fan of the mission statement per se. I know that many companies have them. Many companies are required to have them from a legal structural governance perspective. But the mission statement has been misused over the years. And I challenge your listeners to go out and just read some random mission statements. And what you typically get is just a mishmash of everything in the kitchen sink trying to describe the business in a mission statement. I like to focus on purpose. And there's a nuanced difference there, because once you start with purpose, why do we exist? Why are we here? Then you can move on to vision and your values and your end goal setting. And you end up with a series of strategy statements that are more coherent. And you don't have to sit there and try to dream up some mission statement that does have everything in the kitchen sink and ends up meaning nothing to everybody.
I think it makes great sense. I'm thinking of some of my favorite statements in companies, and the one that comes to mind is the Ritz-Carlton, and it's ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. What do you think about that one?
It is wildly not specific.
Okay.
I had not heard that one before. And if I were sitting with that leadership group, what I would do is trot out the 5 whys and just start asking, okay, that sounds interesting. Why are you saying this? What sits underneath this statement? What's the subtext? What are you really trying to accomplish with this mission statement? And more likely than not, what would fall out of that conversation is the real purpose of the organization, and hopefully something that is a bit more clear in terms of why that company exists, so that then they can construct and paint a clear vision for their people, both their customers and their employees. What you're trying to establish through all of these conversations, which, oh, by the way, are non-trivial. These are really, really difficult conversations to have with a leadership team and an extended leadership team. What you're really after is creating clarity for everybody involved, your customers, your vendors, your people, your investors, your stakeholders. And far too often, these kind of cutesy, almost marketing-esque statements that folks come up with for mission, for purpose. Yes, ultimately you'll turn them into marketing slogans that you'll show to the general public, but that's not what clarity is all about. Clarity is not marketing. And don't confuse the creation of organizational clarity with cutesy marketing slogans.
After somebody clarifies what their mission and purpose is, now we go to core values, and so many ways to do that. And everybody has different ideas on what they think the core values can be if you're talking with an executive team. What are some of the ways that you recommend we're talking about the right core values while making sure everybody at the table has a voice?
Yeah. As I mentioned before, many leaders shy away from these conversations because they either A, have a preconceived notion that they're trivial and they're just not going to move the needle on the economics of the business, or they have been locked in a sweaty room with other executives before and haven't gotten great results out of this process, and it is viewed as just work that's almost too hard. It is really hard work, but boy, if done well and done right, you can have some real impactful results that come from these conversations. And the values conversations that you'll have with your senior leadership team, which I also strongly recommend that you have. You put behaviors right alongside values. To me, values and behaviors go together like peanut butter and jelly. Values are kind of the nouns that you are creating for the overall structure of what you want your business to be. And the behaviors are more of the verbs. They are the actions. They are the how we should show up each day in the business. So the advice to your listeners is don't shy away from that work, engage in that work, and really pay it the attention that it's due.
How do you know when you have the right values and the right behaviors? So when you're ready to take it to the team?
It's the coherence of the whole package. And that's why you start with purpose, and then you move on to the organizational vision. And then you determine the values and the behaviors that are going to support that organizational purpose, and then the organizational vision. You will begin to know that you've struck a really nicely configured chord, using my music background here, when you're starting to attract individuals who are working with your business that are in alignment with that purpose, the vision, the values, and the behaviors. They become the attractant to your people equation, which is the most valuable asset of your business. So if you needed more proof or evidence or impetus to the importance of really, really well-constructed strategy statements in your business, it is to support the most valuable asset that you could ever have, which is supporting your people and providing them with that clarity that makes everything else in business so much easier.
Do most companies just understand that people is their most valuable asset, or is that something that has to be taught?
Well, I think I'm proof that it needs to be taught, because I came up in the, how do I put this? I come from a finance background. I come from a numbers background. I come from things are black or white. They are on, they are off. They work, they don't work. And the people side of the equation is not black or white. It is not on or off. It is a rainbow of opportunity and color that once you learn how to approach and tap into that, the diversity of thought and opinion that comes from constructing teams of people that come from different backgrounds with different educations and different perspectives. Wow, the power of that versus the alternative, which is I want everybody to look and think like me, and I'm going to be directive, and I'm going to work in my environment was an Andy said environment where nothing came across my desk without my approval or my permission, and everybody looked to me as the quote unquote boss. you can get pretty far doing that, but you are not going to create this most valuable asset, which is a powerful people equation in your business and building that non-directive organizational culture that allows for everyone to find their voice in the business, and that your ears are open and your mind is agile and accepting of those other perspectives.
I'm sure there are a lot of leaders out there that in order to enact change, they have to admit that maybe they did something incorrectly and that's hard for them. What is a way for them to think, okay, it's not a pride issue, this is a health of everybody issue?
So the mindset that I ask people to embrace is that of a stewardship mindset. A business is a going concern. A business should outlast all of us. In theory, a business should never die. We, as human beings, we come and go. We're made of carbon and we're going to deteriorate. We're going to die. My job as a leader is to set the business up and its people up for long-term success that far exceeds my participation in the business. And once you start thinking about yourself as a steward, as a mentor, as a coach to all of the wonderful people that are in your business and your customer, all of a sudden that changes this whole boss dynamic that many of us, especially people, quote unquote, my age, who are 50s, 60s and beyond, who were led by directive bosses, and it was the boss's word, and that's all that mattered. That's the environment that I grew up in. That stewardship mindset allows for the prying open of the mind and a much more accepting tone and tenor in a leadership style that imagines a future of the business without you.
I love that answer. I can't remember the book, but there was a sales management book that I've read. And this first suggestion was don't hire sales managers, hire sales coaches. And I think that embodies exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. I had a very effective sales leader in our organization who had adopted exactly that mindset. And there's an organizational consultant. He wrote a review of my first book. His name is Amir Ganad. And his whole thing is, I am the one, and it's not about me. Or something very similar to that. So you're now the leader. You're now where the buck stops. But it's not about you. It's not about your growing your ego and your power base and all this stuff that ultimately will create an imbalanced organization. We want to strive toward balance, and the way to do that, a mechanism, mindset to do that, is by adopting the stewardship view.
Andy, what are some of your success stories in using your approach?
So the main success story is, people talk about wanting to flatten organizational structures and get closer to the work. That's what my approach and strategy is designed to do, is to bring leaders out of the gilded halls and the glass and brass castles and down to where the work is actually happening and connect with people across their organization to hear both the successes and the pain points. The adoption of what I call a compassionate leadership mindset is something that was very impactful for me as a leader. Once I really learned what the word compassion means, and that it's not just fuzzy, squishy, puppy dogs and unicorns and roses. Compassionate leadership, think about the word compassion. Compassion is empathy plus the willingness and ability to do something about it. So you are placing yourself into the shoes, the mindset of your people, and through compassionate leadership, you are pledging to make their work better, to improve organizational flow, to improve this balancing act between organizational trust and accountability, and to lift all boats in your organization through your ability to empathize with your people and to go do something about it.
There's so much work that goes into creating and publishing a book. After the book was published, did you have the realization, oh, I should have put this in the book?
So many times, but you have to put pencils down. It is such a maddening process, especially reading your own work over and over and over again. Of course, I had things that I wanted to maybe do a bit more of within the book, but all that would have done was increase the work from 306 pages to something even heavier and even more unapproachable. So you have to be okay with setting the pencil down and looking forward to that next piece of work that I'll hopefully embark on in the near future.
A good friend of mine says that there's a book in everybody. So if that is the case, there are many aspiring authors that are listening to you. What are some key things that they can do if they've never written a book before?
Really think about the why. I'm all about the why, the 5 whys from continuous improvement. Ask yourself as many whys as you have to get down to root cause of why you feel the need to write a book, and connect that why with your purpose. It's going to make writing the book a lot easier. My purpose is to teach, coach, mentor, inspire. That's the tagline of my first book. And it allowed that process to be much more straightforward. And then think about, who's my target audience going to be? Who needs to read what I'm going to write? If you can answer some of those questions, you're pretty far along to then embarking on coming up with the 60,000 to 80,000 words that you're going to need.
If someone just got one main point from our interview today, what would you want that point to be?
I go back to purpose. I go back to the concept of stewardship. People who are of older generations like myself, I'm a late baby boomer. It's really easy to scratch your head and go, why does that other generation act the way that they do? And I would ask that you really think about the cross-generational impact of the work that you're doing, and try to really understand how you can get the most value from the generations that are coming up, and how you can turn who you are into a coach and a mentor to help the next generation succeed.
As I do with all my guests, I ask the same 4 questions. I call it the lightning round. So this is where the point values are double. So are you ready?
Yes, I am ready.
Points mean nothing on this podcast. My first question: if you had the ability to go back in time and speak with your former self on your very first day as a management consultant, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, this is going to take a lot longer than you think it's going to. You think you have all of this wonderful information in your head, and it's just going to miraculously fall out. You're going to start this podcast and have thousands and thousands of listeners. You're going to write these books, and people are going to be clamoring for the information that's inside. Okay, Andy's ego. No, it's not going to work that way. Just like starting any business, unless you have some outsized celebrity and built-in audience that is going to clamor for what you have to say, building that audience, building that business is going to take a lot more than you think it will.
What are the last few books that you've read?
Yeah. So I have the benefit of the Balancing Act podcast, and so I have authors that come on to onto the show. And I just had this guy, Jack Skeels, on the show. He wrote this book called Unmanaged, and Jack grew up as a project manager. His career is primarily focused on project management, which gets a bad rap, and sometimes justifiably so, in the world of business. And he talks about all the things that project managers should be thinking about, and the concept of, okay, let's manage a little less and really focus on the things that matter. I met this guy named Dave Bookbinder, and his book, The New ROI, The Return on Individuals. I love talking to fellow finance people like me whose minds have become awakened and aware that the people side of things are really the most important. And then I love coming back to this book, which is Robert Brown's The People Side of Lean Thinking. Lean and continuous improvement also get a bad rap. And I love his book because it is what it is on the tin. It says, okay, we're going to talk about the impact of lean and continuous improvement on your people and how we can turn what on the surface looks like something that's going to happen to your people to something that you're going to do with your people. So
They're going on my reading list, so thank you for that. A completely selfish question. That's why I'm always asking guests what they're reading. My next question is, this is a fun question. So when Hollywood makes a movie about your life, who do you want playing Andy?
So the Fonz, why am I blanking on his name?
That needs to happen.
Why am I blanking on his name?
His name is Henry Winkler.
Yes, Arthur Fonzarelli.
Yes, no, I can see that. That is a role he needs to play.
He's a super nice guy. He's a kind man, and I like to think that I am also a kind man. And I've been standing in the grocery store line and had people come up to me and say, you look like Henry Winkler. I'm like, okay.
Have you seen Better Late Than Never?
No, I have not.
You've got to put that on your list. I think it streams on one of the services. It's got him, William Shatner.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah, any listeners that haven't seen that, you will laugh. I think they did 2 seasons of it. They do traveling with each other. It's just fantastic.
Yep. No, it's really, really good.
My last question, if you had the ability to speak with anybody throughout history, who would it be with and why?
Martin Luther King Jr. for sure. We have so many warts and painful moments in our past that we just need to really double click on our collective history and continue to take history lessons. So if there was anything that I could get from a direct conversation with him that I could then help propagate so that we don't repeat the many of the failures of history, I think he would be one of a number of historical characters that I would want to do that with.
It's a great choice. Dr. Andrew Temte, thank you so much for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Thank you for having me, Trace.
Scaling Up Nation, I have to say that one of my absolute favorite things about hosting this podcast are all the wonderful people that I get to meet. Maybe it was you at a particular conference. Maybe it was Dr. Temte on this podcast because Charlie introduced him to me to be on the podcast and talk about the book. I just love that. That is such a great benefit of hosting this podcast. Not to mention the sense of community I think we all have as being part of the Scaling Up Nation. And we realize that we are a nation of individuals out there within the same industry, sharing the same day-to-day experiences. Just some of my favorite things about this podcast. And getting to meet people like Andrew Temte is just icing on the cake. I was on his podcast a couple of months ago, and he was so generous. He sent me a copy of his book. It was before it was even released. And I got to take that on vacation with me and read that. It's a great book. It's a great addition to some of the things we talk about here on the podcast about how to run meetings, how to look at core values, all the things that you really need to do to make sure that your organization is lined up and everybody is rowing in the right direction. And when that happens, everybody on the team is empowered because they not only know their job, they know how the work that they do fits in the grand scheme of everything that everybody is trying to build. And when people understand that, there is just a sense of clarity that comes over everybody, and people are able to make decisions in order to accomplish what everybody is trying to accomplish. So many people out there have not done that. So many companies out there have not done that. And they create a bottleneck situation where if I need information, I need to go to the person that's in charge, read them in, and then ask them what I need to do. And sometimes, let's face it, that's what has to be done, depending on the severity of what's working or what they're working on. But all the things that come up to a supervisor's desk, to an owner's desk, are probably not all things that they should have hands on. They should be empowering people to do the things that they can do, that they are good at doing, and then maybe just inform the leader of the company, the owner of the company, the chairman of the board, however it is. And just imagine if everybody's working that way, everybody is working as a team, everybody feels empowered. And I think that's a place we all want to work at. So, Dr. Temte, thanks again for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. We, of course, will have an affiliate link for his book on the show notes page. And I have to say, it is a great book. It is very easy to read, and it is very easy to put into place. One thing at a time. By the way, so many people will read a book like this, and I've mentioned the book, but one more time, the book is called The Balanced Business. And you might say, oh my gosh, there's so much information within this book. How do I start implementing it? Well, you do one thing at a time. So don't get overwhelmed on whatever book you're reading. Maybe you're reading a sales book and you're trying to increase your sales ability. Well, with that, I've got 40 things that this book just taught me to do. How am I ever going to do those 40 things? One thing at a time. Pick the one thing that you think is going to make the biggest difference. Start with that, and then add something next, and you'll have this domino effect. But there's so many people out there that don't do anything because there's just so much to do. So try to narrow what there is that you are going to do, and I promise that will get you started. You might have heard the quote, all you need to do is get 1% better each and every day. If you do the math, you'll be 37 times better by the time you are completed with that. And just think, if you were 37 times better than whatever you're doing right now, because you're just doing 1% more each and every day. So nation, I encourage you to continue to read, continue to try new things, but hold yourself accountable that you're going to do something new each and every day. And if you learn something, try to put it in practice. But at the same time, don't put too many things in practice at the same time. Nation, a gentleman that we all know and love is James McDonald, and he, of course, is bringing us one thing a week to work on, one thing to think on, and make us better each and every week. So here is a brand new Drop by Drop with James.
Welcome to Drop by Drop with James, the podcast segment where we wonder, explore, think about, imagine, and learn industrial water treatment, you guessed it, drop by drop. Together. Today's topic is reverse osmosis data normalization. Over time, RO membrane performance changes. The quality and quantity of permeate water produced and the energy required to produce it will vary. On episode 339, Jane Kucera, author of the book Reverse Osmosis, said, "There are 6 things that affect membrane performance: fouling, scaling, membrane degradation, temperature, pressure, and concentration." I like that succinct list. Fouling, scaling, membrane degradation, temperature, pressure, and concentration. The impacts of each of these are interrelated and complex. Changes in one of them can either hide or exacerbate the effects of another. For example, dropping temperature may reduce the permeate flow rate while increasing pressure may increase it, thus canceling out the effects of each. This makes it next to impossible to determine the true performance of an RO system by simply looking at the raw data. So, what's the solution? If we lived in the world of sci-fi, we could simply take today's RO membranes, put them into a time machine, activate the flux capacitor like in Back to the Future, travel back in time, and install those membranes in the RO machine at the same time they were started up, replaced, or even cleaned, so you could measure how they would perform under the same conditions as the baseline. The same pressure, same temperature, and same water concentration. I keep saying the word same, but that is key here. How would today's membranes perform in yesterday's machine under the same baseline conditions? Then you would eliminate the influences of changes in temperature, pressure, and concentration and figure out the real impacts of fouling, scaling, and membrane degradation. Simple, right? Now, where did we put that flux capacitor? It's got to be around here somewhere. Oh, wait. Flux capacitors don't actually exist yet. Dang it! Now what? That's where normalization comes into play. Normalization is a fancy way of saying that you're going to mathematically take those membranes back in time and adjust for changes in temperature, pressure, and concentration. This will allow you to make apples-to-apples comparison of permeate flows by calculating the normalized permeate flow, MPF, of today to compare to the permeate flow at baseline conditions. The same goes for normalized pressure differential, MPD, and normalized salt rejection, NSR. Your next logical question may be, well, where do I get these miraculous normalization equations? While there are ASTM standards for such calculations, your easiest route is probably to visit your RO membrane manufacturer's website to download their normalization tool. It may be as simple as an Excel worksheet. If you manage an RO system, it is worth your time to learn how to use these tools to normalize your RO data, so you know when it's time to clean the membranes and to find problems as they occur. I'm James McDonald, and I want to encourage you to be like water by forming bonds with those around you, dissolving new knowledge, and making worthy ripples, drop by drop.
Thank you, James. Nation, if you have somebody you want me to interview, please let me know who that is. You can very easily go to scalinguph2o.com and go to our show ideas page, and we can find out who that is. And we will get that person on the show so we can have an interview with them. I told you earlier, that's one of my favorite things, to meet new people. We've got a lot of things coming up training-wise in the industry. I'm going to be at some of those things. Maybe you're going to be at some of those things. Maybe we can meet. I love meeting people that listen to the Scaling Up Nation because, after all, we are a community. We are the Scaling Up Nation. Nation, I'll have a brand new episode for you next week. Until then, take care, folks. Scaling Up Nation, one of my favorite phone calls, emails, text, you name it, to receive is when somebody lets me know that they just received their Certified Water Technologist designation. I love going to conventions where people come up and let me know that they now have that prestigious designation. To help make sure that we are getting more and more people certified, we prepared a course to help prepare you with the confidence you need to sit for that examination. Go to scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep to check it out today.